freaking amazing when you're able to look at it on that scale. But here's the problem. 7,000 is scratching the surface. This need is so much bigger, and we are turning people away constantly throughout the year. So that's really my big call to action here, is to get to be talking with you all, to be thinking with you all, is, are there interventions that we can do either on an individual level or an organizational level to combat the systemic issue that we're seeing time and time again? So we've been able to pilot this out with partner organizations, thinking about, I mean, as simple as like, I want to find a way to make sure that we're referring people to this resource, to can we partner on thinking about how to put together a workshop, to, hey, could you help us find a couple volunteers? The more volunteers we have means the more people that we can serve. That means the more people are getting access to these credits as a whole. So my ask to you all, my call to action, very similar to Alex's here, is if you want to talk to me, I want to talk to you. So I really would encourage you, if you have any interest, if you have any economic empowerment related program that you think would be adjacent to taxes in any way, I'd love to talk and think about how we can strategize on bringing this service out to the community that much more. I think that's all I got for right now. I look forward to your questions. I think we're going to do that afterwards, and I'm going to pass it over.
I have the clicker. Hopefully I can work it. Hello, my name is Laura Bauer. I am the IDA program manager at Portland Housing Center. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our services, who we are, and how we help support our clients. Great. All right. So who's Portland Housing Center? We're a nonprofit corporation that was founded in 1991 in Northeast Portland. We are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency and a CDFI. We're also a NeighborWorks America charter member and a fiduciary organization for the Oregon IDA program. And we're also a licensed nonprofit mortgage broker. Our mission is that everyone deserves access to homeownership, and we make that possible through quality education, counseling, and financial services. And we also focus on low and moderate income households, as well as communities of color who have historically faced systemic barriers to homeownership. We strive to meet our clients where they are in the home purchase process, and then educate and guide them along the way through every step, all the way through closing. And we do that through our services that we offer, which are HUD certified housing counseling, financial education courses, our lending and down payment services, and then of course the Oregon IDA. Our pre-purchase There we go. Our pre-purchase counseling services are administered by HUD certified housing counselors. And the success of our housing counseling relies heavily on the personal and ongoing relationship that's developed between the counselors and their clients. And that relationship begins with our initial home buyer assessment, where they discuss the client's wants, needs, and goals, and importantly, their emotions around homeownership and their home purchase journey. After the initial home buyer assessment, the client engages in ongoing home buyer counseling. When and how frequently this counseling takes place is really dependent on their personal situation, their timeline for purchase, and how engaged in the process they are. The goal of our counseling services in general is to provide the client with an understanding of how their financial decision making impacts both how their financial decisions impacts both their ability to purchase a home and also the affordability of their mortgage. In addition to our housing counseling services, we also offer financial education classes. We have two types of courses, a general financial education and then home buyer specific education. All of our courses are taught by either our current education and special programs manager or our contracted instructors who are all previous employees of Portland Housing Center. So all of our instructors have a deep familiarity with our mission and our clientele. Under our general financial education classes, we have three different options. Our first is financial fitness. And then we also have two culturally specific courses. Getting Your House in Order was created specifically for African-American clients, and Decide Tu Futuro was created specifically for Latinx clients and is taught in Spanish. So each of these courses is a 5-week HUD certified class, and they all cover the topics of financial goal setting, budgeting, savings, debt and credit, and consumer protection. And importantly, these classes all start with a discussion about how each participant's personal history and values relate to their decision-making around money and therefore their financial well-being. Our culturally specific offerings are an especially important piece of our education offerings and services. And while both of these courses cover the same topics as financial fitness, they were each created through the lens of their specific culture. So financial practices can vary widely across different cultures. And so it's really important to approach these topics through these culturally specific lenses in order to ensure that all participants can access the material in a meaningful way. Talking about money and finances can be a really sensitive topic for many people. So these classes are specifically designed to be a safe space for open and honest discussion for participants. In order to help create and maintain that safe space, only those clients who identify as belonging to that particular culture are allowed to enroll in these courses. Getting your house in order specifically has become the gold standard for this type of education. It's been adopted by NeighborWorks America and shared across their entire network nationwide. Our second financial education category that we offer is home buyer specific education. Specifically, it's called Home Buying 101. And this is an 8-hour HUD certified course. It meets the requirements for many loan and down payment assistance programs that require home buyer education, including the IDA program. The Home Buying 101 focuses on the financial consideration, practical and financial considerations for folks who are ready to start the home purchase process. And it's really designed to be an all-encompassing review of every single step of the home purchase process, from the pros and cons to renting versus buying, through the specific roles of all the professionals that you encounter through this process, all the way through negotiating and closing the loan. The ultimate goal of Home Buying 101 is to provide our clients with a sense of control and understanding of this process. Purchasing a home is the largest financial investment of most people's lives. And like Alex mentioned, there's no comprehensive financial education set up in our country for most anybody. So it's really important that these participants all have the information they need to make sound decisions around this large purchase based on their personal situation. All of our financial education courses are currently offered online, live over Zoom. And then we do have self-guided options as well for folks who can't attend the live classes. There we go. Our next category of services that we offer is our lending and down payment assistance programs. As I mentioned before, we're a nonprofit mortgage broker, but our loan department is comprised of a non-commissioned loan officer, and it's specifically structured that way intentionally to ensure that our lender is providing unbiased and transparent information for all of our clients, whether they're discussing loans we offer or reviewing options from outside lenders. We do offer first mortgages for both our clients and anyone else in the community. And then we also have a mortgage assistance program, or a MAP loan, which is a 30-year fixed rate loan that clients can layer with other down payment assistance to receive up to 20% of their purchase price for their down payment. This allows the client to eliminate mortgage insurance and is often paired with the Oregon State Bond, Oregon State Bond loan, which is a 30-year below market rate mortgage. In addition to our MAP loan, we also have a variety of other grant and forgivable loan programs. And these down payment assistance programs include funds from the cities of Portland, Gresham, Beaverton, Washington County, and the state of Oregon, including the IDA. So the IDA program, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a statewide match savings program that's funded by the state of Oregon through OHCS and administered by Neighborhood Partnerships. Participants or savers open their IDA account at a local bank and save for a minimum of 3 months. And then we match their savings at a rate of 5-to-1 for up to $6,000 in down payment funds. Savers are also required to complete counseling services as well as financial education that's tailored to their specific IDA goal. The IDA program has a number of different asset classes or goals that participants can sign up for. They can open an IDA for a first-time home purchase, for support of their small business, or for higher education costs. At PHC, we offer the IDA specifically for first-time home buyers. And to be eligible for the program, participants have to be at or below 80% of the area median income, have no more than $20,000 in net assets, and be a first-time home buyer. As a down payment assistance program, the IDA is a bit unique in the sense that once savers are accepted into the program, their eligibility carries with them all the way through until they're ready to purchase. So often that can be 2 or 3 years later. Most down payment assistance programs require eligibility at the time you receive funds, whereas with the IDA, we really hope that folks enter in need, and then by the time they get through the program and end, have hopefully bettered their financial situation to make their home purchase more affordable. The primary goal for IDA is for all participants, whether they purchase a home or not, to exit the program with increased financial stability and an understanding of how to maintain that stability, and ultimately provide a foundation for them to create their own generational wealth. One of the biggest challenges that we face right now, that our participants face, is just mortgage affordability. Interest rates have increased steeply in the last couple of years, more than doubling since 2021. And unfortunately, we haven't seen home prices adjust down to make enough of an impact on affordability for most buyers. As an organization, we face a similar challenge, which is the amount of funding required to help our savers with mortgage affordability. In the past, providing someone with $3,000 or $6,000 in down payment funds could help with their homeownership goals, but unfortunately, in most cases, a lot more than that is needed now. As the market's gotten more difficult and lower income households have faced increased barriers to homeownership, the IDA program as a whole has adapted to try to better meet our savers' needs. Through statute changes at the state level, we're now allowed to provide more flexibility in how our savers save within the program. The rate at which we match funds has also increased from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1, meaning that our participants can save less money in order to receive their full match amount, and they can typically reach their goal a lot quicker. Also, the amount of grant funds that participants can receive per year has increased, and we also are able to provide some matched funds for participants in the case of a financial emergency that they may have, or if they need to exit the program without purchasing. Another challenge that our participants face is accessibility, both in technology and language. As an organization, all of our services and communication and all of our classes are available in both Spanish and English, and we also have bilingual staff available to work with all of our Spanish-speaking clients. Another accessibility issue is technology. During the pandemic, when everything kind of all businesses and services went online, there were a lot of folks that didn't have access to a computer, a desktop or laptop computer. And so making sure that people can use their phone, which is a primary source of access to the internet for a lot of people, has been really important for us to make sure that our services are still accessible. And so in closing, at Portland Housing Center, we're really proud of how our counseling, financial education, down payment assistance, and lending services all work together to support our clients. It's really important that homeownership is not only attainable, but also sustainable for the long term. And we take a holistic approach to the home purchase process to ensure that even clients who don't ultimately purchase a home come away from their experience with Portland Housing Center with the education and the confidence that they need to really take charge of their financial future. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cristina Palacios, and I work for Housing Oregon, the one that put at this conference. They put this conference every year, and I'm very proud to be part of the team. I'm the membership and relation industry support director. And we are a statewide organization of 95 nonprofit organizations, allied business supporters who are building, financing, and supporting affordable housing. We advocate on the local and state level for programs and policies that enable our members to provide housing in low-income working families, people with disabilities, seniors, and others struggling with housing in the community throughout Oregon. We want to make sure that there is affordable housing for all. I want to share a personal story with you today of how I came to the movement and how our communities are vulnerable to different situations in our life. And how economic justice plays a big role of how we help ourselves and our community to get out of that poor financial choices that we make every day, systematic oppression that happens just because we exist, people with disabilities, people that don't speak English, low income community in general, we have less opportunities, and how we break the barriers is important. So I'm glad you're here today learning about those great tools that we have, programs to help to help lift up our community. So I'm gonna talk to you about my story about doing payday loans, and then you're gonna be like, what? But it's gonna make sense about how it changed me from being squeezing money from my own community to learning about how to break the injustices that happen in our community. And again, a little bit about myself. I've been a community organizing, doing housing advocacy for 15 years. I had worked for 3 nonprofit organizations, and everything started because when I moved to Oregon in 2000 from California, I came to Oregon with management experience, and within a month, a payday lender offered me a great job with good benefits. Benefits that immigrant, 23 years old, never dreamt of. They gave me full insurance for my entire family, a fat check. I was making $8 per hour in California, and I had 2 jobs, and I was on my side job was collecting rents. With all that income, many hours, I still couldn't meet end means. I still was struggling to pay rent, bills, and support my sisters and brothers that made even less money than I was making. So, when the company offered me full benefits, bonus checks, education, they had a great program for, in a year, you could use up to $10,000 for your own education. I took it with no hesitation. I was like, yes, I'll take everything. So, what happened is, what I was learning from the payday loan industry, I was learning how to make fast money from hardworking people like me. And back then, I didn't feel any guilt because I didn't connect economic justice with my career back then. So day in, day out, I was cashing checks, doing money orders, and doing payday loans. The last one is where we made the most money. We were charging $15 for every 100 per paycheck. Yes, it was a rat trap. And it was very injustice for the community to be facing that. Many years I was learning everything that I could to squeeze those dollars out of my own community. People from all over the world came to wire transfer, cash their checks, do the payday loans. And little by little, I started to see the injustice of my work. Those were my own community members that could not open a bank account. They had bad credit. They did not have the documentation that they needed to open accounts or turn elsewhere to take care of their monetary needs. I saw teachers, nurses, construction workers, retail store workers, cooks, waiters, etc. It was not until I had a housing situation that happened to me where the landlord denied repairs at my apartment. And I called the landlord, and basically they told me, you're a Latina, you just come and work and go to sleep. That made me very mad. It was a fair housing violation. I was like, no, I'm not. So I called an organization that taught me my rights and responsibilities. I successfully got my repairs. And I started volunteering because I didn't want other Latinos, or not only Latinos, when I started working with that nonprofit organization, many from different parts of the world, again, similar to the payday loan, they will come for our services. But on the other side, they were taken advantage in many ways. So I start seeing the big difference between, how a corporation makes the money from our community and how, again, working the nonprofit, I saw how our community were still being taken advantage. So over the years, things came clear to me. I needed to help people getting financial education. I needed to help them to find opportunities so they could thrive in their own communities. And I know that we don't need payday lenders, that we need banks to break the barriers to everyone so everybody can have access to wealth. We need to assure that community agreements are enforced. And if you don't know what community agreements are, look it up. It's a big deal. When banks are in our neighborhoods, they have a mandatory clause that says they need to put back the money into our community. And those agreements happen, but guess what? We don't know about those agreements. We don't enforce them. So what we can do together to change that is inform ourselves, inform our community, invite financial education, and get all the resources that our communities need to get out of the hole. So I'm proud to be working with Housing Oregon because we do a lot of advocacy, and you're all invited to come and join us. We're supporting legislation efforts to pass recommendations from the Joint Task Force addressing racial disparities and homeownership opportunities. Many of those, if you were not aware, the legislation just closed, and many of those recommendations that we had, not only my organization, but many organizations, to close the racial disparities on home ownership didn't pass. And sometimes the laws don't pass not because we're not speaking up, but because we need to make more noise. We need to gather our community and educate them and bring them to Salem and speak up for themselves. Mortgage interest deduction program is another thing that Housing Oregon will be focusing. We have worked very closely with Oregon Center for Public Policy and the Housing Alliance to advocate during the mid legislation to do sustained funding to expand homeownership opportunities, and especially for BIPOC community. IDA program is another one. That's the one that my Laura here was explaining, support legislation to increase funding for individual development accounts to help individuals in household for down payments and so they can become homeowners. Many do not know about the ID programs. My family didn't know about the ID program. My husband opened a business about 4 years ago, and basically we started with a dream. He said, I'm gonna open my business, went and got his state license, but we had no foundation. For example, we didn't have the city of Troutdale where we live license because we didn't know we needed. So when we educate ourselves and our community, you given the opportunity to break the injustice and close the gap of wealth. So I encourage you all to join peer groups that are doing housing advocacy for home ownership opportunity. And overall, my hope is that the doing loans experience that I have brings you a message to you about like what else is out there not letting you or your community progress. how can we together break the cycle of poverty in our community? That depends on each of us. So please go to your community, tell them about the programs. Join us at Housing Oregon by becoming a member and speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sina and Alex and Riley and Laura. So the idea here is that you start with your organization, wherever you are, and listen to some different models of how you might do financial empowerment with people, and maybe get help from these folks or others. So we can keep talking with the panel, but I'd like to see if we can include you a little bit. If you had a question or comment for anybody? Good, thank you. I was gonna go to step 2, which would have been painful for everybody.
First and most importantly, thank you for everything that you guys do within the community. And it's really easy to relate to all of you guys' organization. And second question is, I'm going back to the title of the class today. What's the, I guess, the challenges and what are the successes running a successful organization? So obviously you guys hold some high roles within the organization. So give us an idea of running an organization and being involved and be able to succeed, if that's recruiting volunteers or things like that. How does that work?
Did you figure out how you would determine who took the question? Who would like to answer that? Really? Thank you.
I can take a shot and then please fill in. Some challenges that I can think of immediately is just like, how do you scale efforts? Like once you get items into place, really thinking about how you can appropriately staff and continue a lot of the amazing efforts that are done there is always something I'm constantly thinking about. So in my particular line of work, the bread and butter of what we do is having more and more volunteers come on board. So trying to think through creatively of how do we continue to bolster that workforce and make sure that we get enough people to come in to be able to provide that many more services out in the community is a continual challenge that we see across the board. So a part of the successes of that though is I think really just taking the time to try to think strategically on how you can grow out those programs is really important. And I think you really got to think about how to customize out to make that need that you're trying to do out into the community. So for us, that was like, okay, we want to do intentional investments on thinking through what are the key staffing pieces that we need in place that are going to help us grow strategically. For us, that was like really thinking about how do we make sure our recruitment team is as strong as it can be? How do we make sure our training team is as strong as it can be? And then once we actually get these folks in line, how do we make sure that they have as good of an experience as possible so that we can deliver these services as much as possible? So that's my 2 cents.
Someone else?
Oh, they were answering.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. I was just going to add, as far as building an organization, I think it's really important to make sure that we work to have staff and team members that reflect the community that we're trying to serve. It's really important to meet people where they are and make sure that we're listening to the people that we're trying to help. It's really easy to get caught up in an idea of what we may think is the best idea or the best thing, and listening to the folks that we're trying to help and find out, what it is that they need. And I mentioned earlier with IDA, one thing that the neighborhood partnerships and HCS has allowed us to do in the last few years is really kind of turn IDA in a different direction. It used to be a very strict program. It had really specific goals about training people to save a certain way and do certain things. And we're really listening to the people that we serve and finding out that like this flexibility is really helping people go a lot farther than what we were doing before. And so I think it's really important to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at and that we always are continuing to listen to the people that we're trying to serve and use that to guide our actions and our visions as an organization.
I think to me, the barriers from working with BIPOC community is breaking the barriers that exist in our community. First is education. Sometimes not only the information is not accessible to our community, it's a lot of new information. providing language access is huge. Tech access is another thing. I have the privilege to work with up to 12 languages at once, and trying to serve everyone is difficult. What do you get a lot of times? Like there is not enough funding, and there isn't a lot of funding. That's true. It doesn't mean that all community that don't speak English as first language don't deserve the same. If we are trying to make economic justice or housing justice, we need to be able to serve everyone. So to me, the biggest win that, or not the biggest win, I had helped to win big campaigns like Section 8 reform. The most recent one is to make sure that when there is climate disasters, everyone can tap into the funding, because many were left out because they didn't have a social security number. So we've been advocating at county level, state level, to say everyone pays taxes. So everybody should be able to tap into funding. So OHCS is breaking those barriers, but those barriers are not broken up in many places. So as a nonprofit organization, I would say you have to do internal fights. And that's very challenged, because on one side you want to help the community, but your own organization face barrier like lack of staff. A lot of times, we run with volunteers, and we're very thankful for the volunteers. At the same time, when you look at an economic justice for the BIPOC community, I had volunteered like 25 hours per month, putting my own family into very hardship situation because I'm using my time. So I'll say volunteers in general, they're great, but sometimes also those volunteers, there are students that they need to make money too, because they left home and they need to create their own wealth. So looking those things with a loop is important. And all organizations, we're trying to do the best with very little resources. So that's where you all come to the picture to help us to advocate for fair wages, for fair opportunity for all. And I could name a lot more, but that's what I can share. Thank you.
Sure, quickly. I think for an organization, it's really important to have a clearly articulated value proposition for what you're offering, and that it is really filling a clear gap, and it's narrow enough to where people can understand what services you're providing. And the other that we often do in the nonprofit world, or the world that is serving underserved and marginalized communities, is we try to do everything, and we see a shiny object that we think is going to be helpful, and we chase after it. And what I always like to encourage folks to do is, apply what we call the 20-80 rule, which is 20% of the effort achieves 80% of the impact. And this is something that me and my team are constantly re-articulating in any meeting that we're having. Is if it's falling outside of the 20% that's achieving the most impact, then you're actually detracting from your overall impact, because you're spending time on less impactful activities. So I think it's just a useful exercise to really always be thinking about, particularly in organizations where resources are so scarce, to really utilize the time and efforts that you have on just the most impactful elements of what you're doing.
Thank you all so much. This information is really helpful. My question might be overly specific, in which case I can hang around afterwards and chat, but I'm curious about partnerships in that scaling up effort. My organization runs a regional housing barrier busting fund in Central Oregon that makes flexible money available for clients of our partner agencies who are transitioning from homelessness into housing. So usually it's paying security deposits, but it's pretty flexible. And I would love to turn that into a very low interest loan program along with financial literacy courses so that people could be improving their credit while they're a renter. I'm afraid of the mission creep aspect, and not knowing who we could partner with, if not offering that in-house. So that might be like a very specific example of scaling up to do some kind of financial literacy, but I'm curious if you just had any brilliant ideas related to what we're already doing. Thanks.
Alex, am I right that you partnered with Lemon and stuff? We'll take that one, and then, Laura, if you could talk a little bit about, not that Housing Center, not Housing Center would partner, but you do offer financial instruments. I don't know, no one's here from Hacienda, do you today? I don't know, no, Hacienda also offers some of those instruments, so I want to go to Alex and then Laura on that question, if that's okay.
That's great. Thanks for the question. I think partnerships are the most effective way just in general to scale. You can't do everything. You need to figure out who's doing what. And so doing a landscape of who's providing what is really, really important. In the financial literacy space, there's a lot of online options available, in person, there's Junior Achievement, there's Financial Beginnings, there's a couple others. What we do is really unique in that we can essentially meet the scaling demands of any organization that comes to us. So for instance, if you want to be providing within your organization to your clients, weekly financial literacy classes, banking, crediting, budgeting, you name it, we can send in volunteers to meet that need. And so we can help organizations scale their own financial literacy project essentially to near limitless. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Jerry mentioned, we do offer financial education courses in-house. They're the two courses that we offer, two types of courses, are a requirement for IDA. So the IDA is a statewide program, and so there are organizations all over the state that also offer similar education. So we focus on homebuyer education, but our general financial education, which sounds like it might be more in line with what you're thinking, those courses are available all over the state. And so that might be a good place to start, is just reaching out to IDA providers or network providers that do the education piece, and see how partnering with someone geographically near you, because we're a little bit farther away here in Portland, might be a good place to start as far as access to those classes, because yeah, they're a really great tool.
You also had a lending instrument question. Could you just say more about that? Maybe I can answer that for you. Wanted to.
Yeah, so right now we're just giving out like grants essentially to individuals for security deposits. We don't have a great mechanism of trying to turn those grants into loans. I don't even know at this point if it would be viable to try to turn those into a low interest loan program. So I'm working with our community action agency and with our public housing authority. The Public Housing Authority does have this kind of tiered, if you can afford it, it's a low interest loan. If you can't afford it, it's a grant. So like I have the local supports, I guess, but I would just love to hear if you have any brilliant ideas about how we could partner or not do the loans in-house, but still like enable folks to build their credit as renters.
Would you want to talk about second mortgages? Otherwise, I can take that question in a couple of different directions, but about well, if you're buying a house, so second mortgage for some of the down payment, that's not the same as a security deposit, but it might help her to hear how that works.
Sure. So the second mortgages are a layered product that qualified participants can access for down payment funds. And it lowers their monthly interest or their monthly mortgage payment, removes private mortgage insurance. We have in-house lending. So like I said, we're a nonprofit mortgage broker. So we do have that in-house. That is not my department, so I can't really speak to the development of that and how that came about. But I imagine that there are some community banks, maybe credit unions and such, that would have, funding available for that sort of thing. But that's really kind of outside my wheelhouse, so I don't want to speak on it too much.
All right. So a couple of ideas are, I think you might have mentioned it, to offer it as a potentially forgivable loan. So some circumstances you'd ask for it to be paid back, and some circumstances you wouldn't. Is one model. If it's viewed as a high risk kind of thing, then sometimes there's a loan loss pool that's set up. So if someone puts money up into a pot, and then it covers the people who don't pay you back. If you do that, actually, on a larger scale, banks will often work with organizations if there's a loan loss pool, because it protects them. It protects them from risk. I think that people who run and the panel might now we got to get back to the panel a little bit. So if you're running an IDA program, there's various ways that I think that IDA programs should be supplemented by other creative kinds of work. And people might be more willing to commit resources, knowing that there's other resources being committed to people overall. So as a part of a package of how you work with people around IDA programs, whether they're state funded or funded from other sources, I think that's possible. But I think the lesson here, and I think this gets back to the panel, is if you're giving people financial assistance of any kind, it's also an opportunity for financial education, right? If you're giving them their taxes, if you're trying to give them a mortgage, you don't say, well, let's sit down, and talk about the larger picture, if you will, and what else you need and what else we might do for you or partners might do for you. It becomes part of a growth process that's pretty significant. So I know an organization in Tampa, for example, that they give IDA specifically so they can draw people into a financial counseling relationship and work with them in developing assets over time. I don't know if any of that helps, but anytime you start one thing, it leads to another question. So if you're giving down payment, security deposit assistance, you're really being drawn into the person's rental situation, to some degree, their relationship with their landlord, their ability to pay their rent, that sort of thing. I don't mean you're responsible for it, but I mean there's a conversation there that can be had if you choose to have it. So that helps. Thank you. Another question, please.
I actually have two, so just prepare yourself emotionally for that. One of them is going to be more general that I think most of y'all can speak to, and then the other one is about IDA specifically. But first, for the general one, it's just a palate cleanser. I know that all of y'all provide different forms of financial literacy and financial empowerment education. Would y'all speak to how you include like trauma-informed education, especially since finances can be such a triggering topic for people, and especially for those of you who are working with volunteers who might not have a background in kind of trauma and how that can impact money. You speak to how you prepare folks who are leading that conversation with clients about how they kind of care for that component of this work.
It's a challenging one, but if you feel like answering
That's a great question, first of all. Coming from a trauma-informed background is really important when working with any community. I do think that's probably an area where we could improve as an organization. We do have our two culturally specific education courses that do have that as sort of a base for where we're coming from. Like you mentioned with money, it's a really sensitive topic for a lot of people. It can be very triggering. It can bring up a lot of really heavy emotions. And so we do, like I mentioned before, try to create a safe space for our participants while they're in these groups, in these rooms, to make sure that that they feel comfortable delving into kind of the deep nitty-gritty piece of where these decisions are coming from, why we do the things we do with money, why we believe the things we believe about money, because that all impacts our ability to be financially successful in this capitalism system that we are all in. And yeah, I think that's, like I said, I think that's a great question. And I think that more organizations need to come from that perspective.
We're gonna fight over the mic up here. Sorry. I'll approach it from the volunteer perspective, because that's a lot of what we are doing. And I'll say we try to take a comprehensive approach in thinking about that. What I mean by that is really trying to map out from like a volunteer's perspective, like where are we interacting with them and how do we interject ideas, not only on trauma-informed care, but also thinking about DEI essential work, and how do we infuse that throughout the entire process that the volunteer is going to be working with us. So that's really taking an intentional look at like, what is our marketing materials and how we present the program, all the way to how do we look at the application with it? Is there specific language that we could put in there that could be that would be promoting that this is what this environment is going to look like, and better prepare for individuals as they go into the program to have those expectations on there. Also, training is just it's a big part of it. So we have case-based examples that we do. So a lot of the work that we try to do in those case-based examples is build in different scenarios that we see specifically in the tax world that will better help frame the individuals about conversations that are going to come up as they jump into the actual work itself. So, you know, thinking about it from like the very beginning and how we're trying to cultivate individuals that will be interested in participating in that and making sure that's understood from the get-go, have that a part of the training, but then also for the actual service itself, trying to make sure that we have a good, as you're saying, supportive environment that can be trauma informed and I'm losing the word, a responsive environment that can facilitate that. So thinking about how we have staffing and being very transparent about, okay, this is the process that we have with the clients coming through, making sure that the clients understand it, the volunteers understand it, and the staff understand how the exact process is going to work and flow. So everybody's on the same page. But I will echo, I think it's something that we can improve on as well. And it's something that we continue to need to think about and focus. So I would just encourage you to always put that lens and focus on what you're trying to do and thinking about through the whole delivery of service, if that makes any sense.
Trauma informed from advocacy perspective is difficult because when we do advocacy, we assume that everyone should be sharing their story. Or when you're providing a service, you think that everybody's gonna fit into your criteria, right? Like not understanding if you're gonna provide a service like an IDA, and you're like, well, you know, if you have bad credit, that's what we need. We need you to qualify to have bad credit. And some people are like, well, what do you mean with bad credit? Is it my credit score or is it criminal history? So not understanding the two differences to me is, you know, you need to be able to articulate to the participants in a way that you don't offend them and just don't assume, don't, you know, ask, like, tell me your story, get to know them a little bit, because sometimes I come like, I have a criteria, you know, to get them into advocacy or a service that I'm gonna provide. And it's like my way or no way. And I have that conversation with funders all the time. It's like, you're disqualifying somebody because you have a criteria that we need to meet. And that is not trauma informed, because we need to work with what people need and adjust what we need to get to be able to help them. So to me, the most important thing is help the community and don't like whatever you need to collect, you need to collect. But if you don't, you're gonna open the opportunity for everyone. It has to be very trauma informed. And another thing that I wanted to bring, trauma informed is one thing, and understanding the cultural aspect is another thing. Like one of the things that I learned working with communities from overseas, and I don't want to say Somali or one country because I'm not familiar with all the countries, but for example, the Muslim community have shared with us that when they do land in, they want to go and borrow money, it is against their cultural religion to pay interest. And there is a way that it should be explored. And they told us the way, like some people that we interviewed, they shared with us like, for Muslim community, the way that you, like, it's okay if you want to charge them up interest, and maybe I'm not gonna make justice on how to explain it, but for example, they say you have a box of shoes, it's $220. They are willing to pay you the $220, but it's against their beliefs and religion to keep charging them like 5% for 2 years on that box of shoes. So if you don't, I think when working with different ethnicities, you need to, like, again, listen to them and see how it's breaking their religion beliefs or their system that they work with, and just say like, well, they're in America, they need to understand it. I don't think that's equitable. I think we need to analyze ourselves and say, what can we do so those community members have the same opportunity? And I don't think about being in the United States. I'm just thinking being in the world, being a human. How are you breaking the barrier so that human has the same opportunities that every other human should have?
Yeah, I think just, sorry. I know, my blocking friend. I think, so Financial Beginnings, we have a huge pool of volunteers, and we have the recognition that all volunteers are not going to be appropriate for all situations. And so I think recognizing if where there is a heightened need for a more sensitive, a greater volunteer training or coaching for certain opportunities, I think is something that you have to do internally. And ultimately, trauma informed is about preparing someone to be a good facilitator and to facilitate without judgment, to get people to speak, creating that safe space. And so once you've kind of identified volunteers that you think could be good facilitators, it's about helping to advance and coach them to get better and be more comfortable in different diverse spaces with different populations. And then one of the things that we do as an organization is, prior to a volunteer stepping into a classroom where we think, a more trauma-informed approach is really, really important, or there's different cultures that are represented that the volunteer might not be totally knowledgeable about, is that we always connect that volunteer with the organization itself prior to stepping into the classroom, because that gives them the opportunity to learn the specifics about who they're going to be in front of, so that they can adapt the content and the material and their presentation to meet the needs of the people that are showing up.
Awesome. Thank you all. That was so helpful. I do have a second question. This one is about IDAs, so a little bit more specific. I am familiar with IDAs, but at a very surface level. Like, I understand what they do, how they work, but I'm not super familiar with the resources available in Portland specifically, especially for folks who are maybe trying to end cycles of homelessness or poverty, et cetera. And I know that I think Housing Oregon is the only one on the panel who explicitly works with IDAs, and y'all are specifically home ownership, so this may or may not be the place. But I am curious about kind of like how, so our organization works with college students who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, and provides them with subsidized housing while they finish their degree. It would be extremely beneficial for our students, especially those who are first generation students, BIPOC students who are trying to end cycles of poverty in their own families, to be able to access an IDA program, so that when they leave our program, they're able to pay the security deposit at private market rental, or able to buy a car, able to pay for more of their education, et cetera. So I would be interested to hear about how folks who maybe are not interested in home ownership specifically, but might be interested in other IDA programs, such as like education, security deposits, et cetera, could get involved. And if you could speak to, I know you mentioned that there's increased flexibility. If you could talk a little bit more about what that looks like can education funds be used for housing because you need a place to live while you're doing school? What's the more the merrier?
Yeah, so great question. There are so many different resources that IDA funds can be used, or IDA resources that can be used for so many different goals now. I think originally when IDA was first introduced, it was higher education, small business, and homeownership only. And now we have many, many more. So like you mentioned, we only do homeownership at Portland Housing Center, but there are organizations all throughout the state that do multiple different IDA goals within one organization. So car purchase is one for sure. Higher education obviously is also one. And some of that flexibility comes when a participant works with a specific organization that offers those multiple different channels. So they could start with one as their primary goal, even graduate, receive funds for that, and then switch over to a different goal. That's also an option. Or not graduate, not use the funds for that goal. If maybe they're doing higher education, then they decide, you know what's really important for me right now is I need to get a job and I need a car to have a job. And so they can transfer that savings and those match funds over to a car purchase. That all is really specific to each individual organization that offers the IDA. So what we tell folks who come through our program and maybe are exiting and purchasing a home or not, and are still interested in IDA and still may be eligible, is to go to the OregonIDAinitiative.org website. Recently revamped. So the front page has a big search bar right in the middle now. So you can put in what you're hoping to save for, what part of the state you live in, what language you want services in, and to be able to find different organizations that are offering IDAs in that category. And so, and also another thing that we do is folks that come to Portland Housing Center and in the IDA program, if they ultimately decide that homeownership is not for them, it's not going to work right now, they can transfer their eligibility to another organization for a different asset goal. So we, there we go. Okay. So we've had participants just recently who they started a business during the time that they were in the IDA program and decided, you know what, we want to focus on our business right now, not on purchasing a home. And so they transferred over to another organization and their eligibility followed them, even though were they to apply today, they would not be eligible. Like I mentioned before, that's kind of a unique piece of IDA is that eligibility is determined up front. So, so yeah, there are a lot of opportunities for what some would say are creative uses of IDA, but really it's the direction that the program is going and really trying to meet, low and moderate income Oregonians where they're at and where they need support.
I would think that you're helping the person finish college. And so even if you're not funding tuition, you are funding education. And I would think that might fall into that, or you might get an adjustment to be able to do that, or the organization you're working with might. So we're near the end of the day and of this workshop. Does anyone have any final questions for the panel? Then let me ask each of you to, you're about 1 minute to kind of conclude, and thank you, you've been great. We'll each take a minute and we'll finish up.
Sure. Thanks again for giving us this opportunity to come up and share our work with all of you. I would just encourage you, I'm leaving some cards up here. I don't have any slides, but please take one if you want to get in touch with me about accessing our financial empowerment programs. My team's ready to talk and see how we can collaborate. Thank you.
I'm going to echo Alex a lot. Thank you all for coming here and joining this conversation. It's been very fun. If you think there is any interest or ability to think about how to grow volunteer tax preparation with your organization, that's something we're very interested in helping supporting. So I'd love to talk to you about that if that's what you're interested in. Thank you.
I will also say thank you. Thank you for having me and thank you for the great questions. I too will leave some cards if anyone's interested in connecting to talk more about any of these topics or potentially partner with us for any of our services that we offer. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. My invitation is to search housingoregon.org and join our movement. Our movement is your movement. If you would like to become a member, doing the membership relationship, so I can sit one-on-one with you to talk about how to become a member and get active. Economic justice and housing justice is big for us, and we like to invite you to be part of the movement. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. You were great. You were so well organized. I just have to be here to move the mic around. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Well,